Hi, and welcome to this episode of John's Model Kit Review. Today, I've got another classic kit for you. It is AMT's Curtis P-40K Warhawk, and this is AMT part number 8794. The copyright date on this kit is 1996. The box art on this kit is of Ed Nollemeyer's P-40K downing a Japanese Zero. I had a lot of fun building this older kit and really trying to make it as well as I could. In this review, we're going to be looking at the built-up kit. We'll also take a look at the kit instructions and how the aircraft goes together. We will look at the clear parts that are included in the kit. We will also talk about the interior detail that's provided with the kit. We will also talk about any aftermarket details that I added to the kit, or any deviations from the instructions or modifications that I made to the kit to improve the accuracy of it. We'll also be taking a look at the decals provided in this kit. We'll look at some potential problem areas with this kit and how to address those so you get the nicest build possible. As I said before, this is an older kit. It really does turn out nicely if you take your time, if you address a couple of minor issues with the kit, and if you do a little bit of research beforehand. As far as parts count goes, this is a low parts count kit. It's a very easy kit as far as the assembly goes. This particular kit was manufactured in Mexico, and unfortunately, when AMT shifted their production to Mexico, there was a drastic quality decline in the kit parts, in the clear parts, to the extent that I could not use the clear parts that actually came in this kit. Fortunately, I had those as leftovers from a different version of the P-40, and if you can find one of these that was produced in the US, I would recommend that. Looking at the instructions, part 1 covers the cockpit assembly, and it's a very basic cockpit, and it's going to be somewhat detail painting heavy, but in reality it looks nice if you detail paint it and put some washes in it. I found that what was in the box is certainly acceptable as far as what can be seen through the kit canopy. One thing I did to make this kit more accurate was to add a sill on the inside of the cockpit opening on either side, and I used just a thin plastic strip to do that, and that's visible in this photograph. I added some Edward seat belts to make this a little bit more accurate as well. I added a yellow Mae West life vest that's folded up in the back of the cockpit glass here, and I just used a piece of plastic card to do that. Moving on to step 2, this is really an area to watch out for because there's several aspects to this step that are critical to getting a nice looking build. The first thing I'm going to touch on is the exhausts. They should be just about perpendicular to the vertical side of the aircraft, and so I put a plastic shim underneath each exhaust stack. You do want to use the fishtail exhausts that are in the kit. On the engine cowlings, I would recommend gluing them in tightly against the rearmost surface and then shimming the front of these where the spinner sits. There's a noticeable gap here on almost all AMT kits. If you get this right, it will really improve the look of the finished kit. I also took time to block off the underside of the nose intake just for accuracy so you can't see light through that. Step 2 also includes having you cut off the tail of the aircraft and replacing that with the tail of a P-40K. I would recommend gluing the tail surfaces to each fuselage half and getting a good fit on the fuselage halves first. Another part that I modified in step 2 was part A4, and that is the radiator tri-port. And the front of it's just very thick, so I thinned down the surfaces in the front of that before gluing it in place. Steps 3 and 4 just cover the landing gear and the drop tank. Steps 5 cover the optional bomb assembly. Step 6 covers the wing assembly, and I deviated from this by gluing the upper wing to the fuselage halves first in order to get a very good wing root fit on the aircraft. Step 7 is broken up into multiple parts. Part A is mounting the wing to the fuselage and the cowl flaps. Part B is mounting the landing light and the drop tank assembly. And if you take your time and dry fit things, you should get a nice clean installation of these parts. Part C covers installing the optional bombs. It also covers the pitot tube. Part D covers installing the landing gear covers and landing gear. And finally, Part E covers the installation of the tail wheel and the elevators. As you can see in this photo, everything came out nicely. I didn't really have any issues with fit, but it is important on this kit to clean up the parts thoroughly and to dry fit them before gluing them. Step number 8 covers the prop assembly. It also covers installing the clear parts and the antenna. Just to note, the antenna that's listed here is the wrong style of antenna. Ed Nollemeyer's plane had a DF loop antenna on it. One thing I did was to add a rear view mirror to the front canopy section. You can see that in this picture. Moving on to the painting and decal guide. This is where I found quite a few errors, and this is where I had to do a lot of research on the actual photo of the aircraft. I'll show that here. When I look at the surround on the American markings, to me, the surround is a little bit lighter than the interior color, which would be the dark blue on the American markings. And so that tells me these were probably still painted red. Another thing I noticed was there are 3 white stripes on the top of the nose of the aircraft, so I added those. Another thing that's visible in this photograph is the pinwheels that were painted on the wheels. And it looks like these were just hand painted. They don't look super even. There was no decal for these in the kit, and so I actually hand painted the pinwheels on the main landing gear wheels. For the topside colors, I use olive drab green. I also used a hazel tan. From my research, I think this was close to the color that was used on this aircraft, although it could be a darker shade. And finally, for the underside colors, I used a light gray. The DF loop antenna I used was from an Academy BF109 kit. I used the kit decals for most of this build, and they honestly worked just fine. I had to make some relief cuts on the shark mouth decals just because of the compound curves that they were wrapping around. If you wanted to make it a little bit more accurate, the blue color on the shark mouth decals should probably be closer to a very dark blue or even a black. For the national insignia, I used some leftover decals from a Tamiya kit. In conclusion, well, I honestly couldn't be happier with the way that this kit turned out. I really had a lot of fun building it. I had a lot of fun doing the research on it. And this was fairly research heavy, but I really wanted to do my best to try to get this plane right. It really looks good on the shelf. It's hard to beat a camouflage P-40 with a big shark mouth as far as shelf presence goes. These AMT P-40 kits are simple enough that a novice builder could build one with ease. They're very inexpensive at swap meets, but they have enough detail in the kit that if you take your time with detail painting, if you do a little bit of research, a little bit of modification, you really can make a nice kit out of these. Well, I'd love to know what you guys think. If any of you have built the P-40K from AMT, please feel free to comment in the comment section below. As always, I hope you found this video entertaining and informative, and until next time, model on.